Welcome to Season 5 of the Long-Winded One podcast. Listen as we showcase original work from top Royal Road authors read by professional voice actors. Hear interviews from your favourite lit RPG and game lit authors. Lastly, listen as the Long-Winded One tries his hand at his first ever lit RPG novel, The Four Treasures.
Welcome everybody to another episode of The Long-Winded One. With me tonight, I have a Royal Road friend named Ben. He writes under the pen name Camadt. Welcome to the podcast, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
So Ben, you are probably best known for your Mantle of the Gods work. At least that's the story that I've read and reviewed. I would love, we have a long way to go before we start talking about Mantle of the Gods, but if you could just tell the reader, or I'm sorry, I'm so used to this now, tell the listener a little bit about yourself, where you're from, or if there's, kind of anything in your past that has led you to writing.
I'm from a little town of Heber Springs, Arkansas. I actually have kind of not a background suited for writing. I'm a math major. Writing was kind of the opposite side of the spectrum.
I've done several of these interviews, and there's a lot of scientifically minded people out there working the other part of their brain on Royal Road. So I don't think that's as much of a stretch as you might imagine.
No, and especially with a lit RPG, the math side of things really helps as far as setting up the system and the stats and the numbers and the experience and all of that stuff.
Before we get into the lit RPG, I want to ask you, did you grow up reading? I mean, did you grow up playing D&D? How you must have had some sort of a person in your life that, said, hey, read this. You got to read this. This is great.
So I'm in the middle of the Bible Belt, and most of the stuff that I read growing up was autobiographies. I didn't get into D&D until college. I didn't really get into fantasy novels until college. I think the Dresden Files and by Jim Butcher and Kate Daniels saga by Ilona Andrews were the first kind of books I read when I got to college. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of my entry into the fantasy genre.
Well, how in the world did you come to lit RPG?
I started writing kind of when my brother and I were driving to Florida for our grandmother's 75th birthday. And we were driving overnight, and it was a Friday night. We'd both been at college all week. We both worked 40-plus hours while going to college, so we were exhausted and needed something to keep our minds awake while we were trading off driving. And we started talking about, well, maybe I should write a book and should write something that we, would want to read. So we spent the entire night while we were driving down there kind of outlining the book that I would later write, that's Triftion. And that kind of got me started in the universe that I write in. That was in 2008. Fast forward about 6 years, I fleshed out my universe somewhat, but I was starting to look for side characters, I guess, to pilot their own book series. And we finished watching Sword Art Online with my middle sister, who was 12 at the time. And she challenged me to try to write a book that she gave me the outline for, a very rough outline, and get something publishable within a week. And so I sat down and I wrote into the game, which is game lit, because that's what she told me she wanted me to write. And I think it's 35,000 words, and I got that done in 1 week and then published it on Amazon.
I love that title. What a fitting title for game lit. So you told us kind of how you came to lit RPG and kind of I guess that would be your gateway, the show that you were watching with your sister, right? But what about What about a gateway writer? Was there a game lit or lit RPG writer that you first kind of cut your teeth on?
Probably the first actual lit RPG title that I read was Bruce Sentar's Dungeon Diving. The way he set up his world, and I get into world building. I really enjoy the world building aspect of things, and it opened kind of me up to the genre, and so I then started reading Primal Hunter, He Who Fights with Monsters, The First to Fire. While I was reading those, that was kind of how I got my start into Mantle. My brother told me that he was all caught up on all of his lit RPGs that he was reading. He said that I could write and release things faster than the 3 times a week that the professional authors were doing. So I started writing Mantle of the Gods to give him something else to read.
So at that point, you were reading on Royal Road already?
Not a lot. I started reading Mother of Learning, which isn't really game lit or lit RPG, but that was probably the biggest one that pulled me into Royal Road. The next game lit or lit RPG that I really, really read on Royal Road was your book,
Children of the Cold Moon. Well, I hope you approved of the world building in that.
The world building in there was spot on.
It was after chatting with you and after reading your story, Mantle of the Gods, that I started thinking, well, there's going to be a part 2 to this season 5 that I do. I didn't realize at first that I was going to have to stub. My whole plan was to leave this Children of the Cold Moon open and free on Royal Road, but in order to do a royalty share with my narrator, they force you to do an exclusive deal. And even though they own Royal Road, Amazon, they make you take the work off. So now I'm forced to stub all of my podcast episodes where I had put out my audiobook, all of my Royal Road stuff. And so it came time to replace those episodes where I had posted my book with your book and other wonderful Royal Road fiction. Yeah. So how's your experience been so far on Royal Road?
It's been mostly positive. The authors have pretty much all been great. In the Discords and even on the forums, if you're posting questions and asking, or if you're just talking between 2 authors, I've not had a bad experience yet with another author. That was one of the things I was worried about, and it's been very comforting how helpful people are willing to be to help out other authors. And it's the readers have been mostly fun as well. I had one reader who was wanting to write a shorter chapter story, but had always been too scared to do so. And they came across my book, and my chapters usually run around 800 words. I didn't realize that I actually was doing that until I started looking at the numbers of how long my chapters were running.
Yeah.
But anyway, most people, if you ask how long your chapters need to be on Royal Road, they'll tell you 1,500 to 3,000 words, and I write half that.
I don't know if you're the same way, but it's nice I like to write when I have a visual picture in my head of what I want of a scene, right? Like almost like a painting. I describe it to my friends as each of my chapters is a vignette, something you could paint and that you would find interesting, right? And for me, I'm about 1,600 words, right? That's my goal. 6 pages. I always write 6 pages. And sometimes, I have to come back to it, but that's my chapter, 1,600 words. So it's funny to me that you follow a similar, like you have a number in mind.
Well, that's about how much fits on 2 pages, and Triftion is 100,000 something words. It's over twice as long as my usual books, and I had people who took a year to read it because they were always waiting until they had a large chunk of time to read.
Yeah.
And so they weren't reading very often. But with my shorter chapters, they were reading them in a weekend. So my shorter chapter books were half the size, but they were reading them in less than a week, whereas the longer ones were taking a whole year. And I kind of started tailoring my writing style to cater to that kind of consumption.
Well, now is a great time for you to tell us about these 4 series that you're writing. So we know Mantle of the Gods, and we'll talk more about that later. You've written several books in that Mantle of the Gods series. What else are you posting currently?
Sineater was originally supposed to be game lit, but kind of fell away from that. My youngest brother, and I developed one of my worlds to play a tabletop kind of Dungeons and Dragons type campaign on, and Sineater takes place in that world. The main character is Sectum, and he was adopted by a dwarf smuggler, and there are no other humans on their ship, but they've kind of all taken him under their wing, almost like uncles. He's a Sineater, which means he can take wounds, pain, stuff like that from other people, and he heals a lot faster. The story, he's had a bunch of adventures already. He's 19, but the story really kicks off when his adopted father decides to help smuggle a princess out of a kingdom, and things just kind of keep getting chaotic from there. Sineater was one of my favorite ones to write because I was able to showcase a lot of the different fantasy races that I have in my universe, because the planet is a prison planet where the elves kind of send all of the undesirables. So it has kind of a really wide array of different fantasy races that live there. And it's also one of the ones that's the most aware that it's part of the greater universe. So I got to kind of, tongue-in-cheek make references to some of the other book series. Ascended is my zombie book. It is a zombie book about Byler. He's an orphan from one of the destroyed towns. He's been raised by the Bokor, who harvest crystals from the zombies to fuel their magic. Byler has reached the age where he can go on his proving mission to prove that he's worthy to become a Bokor and try to kind of undergo the transition. And so he sets out in charge of a mission to check on the various post-apocalyptic towns. As books go, things don't go all that great for him. The other one is Into the Game, which follows female protagonist, Kat Bates. I kind of used the idea of a prototype dive technology, like what you would need to do an immersive virtual reality gaming system. So you would need to be immersed in something, then to keep your body with fluids and all that, they'd put you under and have you in some kind of nutrition jelly type deal. And her brother broke into one of the facilities that was supposed to be empty, but was running illegally, and got in one of the tubes. So they allowed her to go in kind of to keep her quiet, because it was just her. And if she's in the game, then she can't really say anything outside the game. And then it's what's she willing to do to find her brother and keep him safe when all of the beta testers are death row prisoners. In the blurb, the last thing I have is, did I mention I'm not a gamer? It was kind of fun to try to think about how someone who wasn't used to playing games would interact with a game system.
So my next question is about giving aspiring writers advice, particularly in the lit RPG or game lit genre. If you had advice for an aspiring writer, what would that be?
Keep writing. That's the number one, keep writing, because like the old Kevin Costner movie, if you build it, they will come. If you keep writing, you keep posting, you keep going. Mantle of the Gods is almost a year old, and it made it on the subgenre Rising Stars list when it was 8 months old, which most people were completely flabbergasted that it made it there after being that old. So, and it's still on there, which is another thing. It's been on there since July, which is boggling. It's turning what's accepted as the window you have to make it completely on its head. So keep writing, because you can get there eventually. It may not happen as fast as you want it to, but the more you write, the better you get at it. And don't be afraid to reach out and ask people for advice or to look over some stuff.
As far as interacting with people goes, how could people interact with you? Are you on any of the socials?
I have a Patreon, which is where it's Earth's Exiles. I'm on Discord, Reddit, and Royal Road, all under my Camadt username. On Facebook, that middle sister runs a page for my books called Camatt's Corner, and she posts random stuff there.
That's really great. She want to run a second page?
Want to? Probably.
Yeah.
Able to? I don't know. She likes to stay busy.
Well, we've heard about 3 of your 4 books that you're currently writing, and we're going to get a chance to hear a little bit of Mantle of the Gods by a voice actor named Steve French, who just has the most amazing voice, but did an incredible job.
Yes.
I wanted to see if you could maybe give us a little bit of a background on what the book is about, and maybe the part that we're going to hear from Steve.
This is the first 2 chapters. Atlas is in a lived-in lit RPG, so there's already plenty of people around who are established adventurers who have been going into the dungeon for decades, and he's reached 18 where he's able to finally get his mantle if he can be bestowed one. And Atlas has been working as a porter. The dungeon farmers go through and kill the monsters. Monsters drop the crystals. He comes behind them and picks up the crystals so that they don't have to stop to pick up their loot. That's been his job for the last 4 years. And he's looking forward to joining them. Mantle of the Gods is definitely a slow burn. And when I say slow burn, think slower. He's level 5 in book 11. So I definitely focus a lot more on the world building than on numbers go burr.
And what did you think of Steve's recording?
I thought it was amazing. I was blown away.
Have you ever thought about, getting taking one of your books and, putting it out on Audible or some other audiobook platform?
I thought about it, but it's always, that's kind of, once you make it, you get to do that. So not something I expected to really hear for a while. I think that was part of what completely blew me away about it was besides, just how great of a job Steve did, it kind of felt like I'd finally done it.
So Mantle of the Gods is now in its 6th book. Book 7 is about to come out on November 18th. You have another announcement to make, is that right?
Yes, I have another book series that I'm going to be releasing January 6th, the 42nd Looper. This one is going to be a lit RPG, isekai time loop.
I hope you're a good note taker.
That is something I have notes all in my main document because you have to know I was not prepared for how many notes I was going to have to take. But anytime that you would see somebody say that, you can do lit RPG or you can do time loop, but you don't do the two of them together because they almost work opposite. With lit RPG, you're continuing to get stronger, but in time loop, you keep resetting that. And they can kind of work against each other sometimes. But I've had a lot of fun writing it. I'm really excited. I have the first chapter actually up on my Patreon that people can go and check out if they want to go look. One of the most interesting parts was trying to figure out how to incorporate a time loop within my greater universe because all of my books are connected. That was some interesting mental gymnastics to go through, but I think I've tied it in.
Well, if anyone can do it, you can do it. Anybody that can write 4 or 5 different series at the same time, I think my hat's off to you, sir. Well, I really appreciate, just interacting with you over the last few months, and really appreciate your story and your contribution to the community. And I really thank you for being on the podcast. And I hope everybody will enjoy Mantle of the Gods.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, and I hope they enjoy it too.
Thank you for joining us down this lit RPG deep dive. Please consider giving us a review on Apple Podcasts and visit us over at longwinded.one, where you can see past episodes and find all of our socials, even our new Discord server. We hope you enjoy.